"but I hope Rivers doesn't go through with it. I'd like to see you people get the collection, and I'd hate to see a lot of nice pistols like that get into the hands of a damned swindler like Rivers. Maybe I can catch him with the hot goods on him, and send him up for about 3 to 5. "Oh, he's too smart for that," Karen despaired. "He can get away with faking, but the dumbest jury in the world would know what receiving stolen goods was, and he knows it." Dorothy and Irene Gresham accompanied Pierre and Karen downstairs. After they had gone, Gresham tried, not very successfully, to interject more life into the party with another round of drinks. For a while, they discussed the personal and commercial iniquities of Arnold Rivers. Trehearne and MacBride, who had come together in the latter's car, left shortly, and half an hour later Philip Cabot rose and announced that he, too, was leaving. "You haven't seen my collection since before the war, Jeff," he said. "If you're not sleepy, why don't you stop at my place and see what's new? You're staying at the Flemings'. My house is along your way, about a mile on the other side of the railroad." They went out and got into their cars. Rand kept Cabot's taillight in sight until the broker swung into his drive and put his car in the garage. Rand parked beside the road, took the Leech & Rigdon out of the glove box, and got out, slipping the Confederate revolver under his trouser band. He was pulling down his vest to cover the butt as he went up the walk and joined his friend at the front door. Cabot's combination library and gunroom was on the first floor. Like Rand's own collection, his collection was hung on racks over low bookcases on either side of the room. It was strictly a collector's collection, intensely specialized. There were all but a few of the U.S. regulation single-shot pistols, a fair representation of secondary types, most of the revolvers of the Civil War, and all the later revolvers and automatics. In addition, there were British pistols of the Revolution and 1812, Confederate revolvers, a couple of Spanish revolvers of 1898, the Lugers and Mausers and Steyers of the First World War, and the pistols of all our allies, beginning with the French weapons of the Revolution. "I'm having the devil's own time filling in for this last war," Cabot said. "I have a want ad running in the Rifleman, and I've gotten a few. That Nambu and that Japanese Model 14, and the Polish Radom and the Italian Glisenti and that Tokarev, and of course the P-38 and the Canadian Browning, but it's going to take the devil's own time. I hope nobody starts another war for a few years till I can get caught up on the last one." Rand was looking at the Confederate revolvers. Griswold and Greer, Heyman Brothers, Tucker and Sherrod, Dance Brothers, and Park, Spiller and Burr. There it was. Leech & Rigdon. He tapped it on the cylinder with a finger. "Wasn't it one of those things that killed Lane Fleming?" he asked. "Leech & Rigdon? So I'm told." Cabot hesitated. "Jeff, I saw that revolver, not 4 hours before Fleming was shot. Had it in my hands, looked it over carefully." He shook his head. "It absolutely was not loaded. It was empty, and there was rust in the chambers." "Then how the hell did he get shot?" Rand wanted to know. "That I couldn't say. I'm only telling you how he didn't get shot. Here, this is how it was. It was a Thursday, and I'd come halfway out from town before I remembered that I hadn't bought a copy of Time, so I stopped at Biddle's drugstore in the Village for one. Just as I was getting into my car, outside, Lane Fleming drove up and saw me. He blew his horn at me and then waved to me with the revolver in his hand. I went over and looked at it, and he told me he'd found it hanging back at the counter at a barbecue stand, where the road from Rosemont joins Route 22. There had been some other pistols with it, and I went to see them later, but they were all trash. The Leech & Rigdon had been the only decent thing there, and Fleming had talked it out of this fellow for $10. He was disgustingly gleeful about it, particularly as it was a better specimen than mine." "Would you know it if you saw it again?" Rand asked. "Yes, I remember the serials. I always look at serials on Confederate arms. The highest known serial number for Leech & Rigdon is 1393. This one was 1234. Rand pulled the .36 revolver from his pants leg and gave it a quick glance. The number was 1234. He handed it to Cabot. "Is this it?" he asked. Cabot checked the number. "Yes, and I remember this bruise on the left grip." Fleming was saying that he was glad it would be on the inside so it wouldn't show when he hung it on the wall. He carried the revolver to the desk and held it under the light. "Why, this thing wasn't fired at all!" he exclaimed. "I thought that Fleming might have loaded it, meaning to target it. He had a pistol range back of his house, but the chambers are clean." He sniffed at it. "Hops number 9," he said, "and I can see traces of partly dissolved rust, and no traces of fouling. What the devil, Jeff?" "It probably hasn't been fired since Appomattox," Rand agreed. "Philip, do you think all this didn't know it was loaded routine might be an elaborate suicide buildup, either before or after the fact?" "Absolutely not." There was a trace of impatience in Cabot's voice. "Lane Fleming wasn't the man to commit suicide. I knew him too well ever to believe that." "I heard a rumor that he was about to lose control of his company," Rand mentioned. "You know how much Premix meant to him." "That's idiotic." Cabot's voice was openly scornful now, and he seemed a little angry that Rand should believe such a story, as though his confidence in his friend's intelligence had been betrayed. "Good Lord, Jeff, where did you even hear a yarn like that?" Quote, "usually well-informed sources," unquote. "Well, they were unusually ill-informed that time," Cabot replied. "Take my word for it, there's absolutely nothing in it." "So it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't suicide," Rand considered. "Philip, what is the prognosis on this merger of Premix and National Milling and Packaging, now that Lane Fleming's opposition has been, shall we say, liquidated?" Cabot's head jerked up. He looked at Rand in shocked surprise. "My God, you don't think—" he began. "Jeff, are you investigating Lane Fleming's death?" "I was retained to sell the collection," Rand stated. "Now, I suppose I'll have to find out who's been stealing those pistols and recover them, and jail the thief and the fence. But I was not retained to investigate the death of Lane Fleming. And I do not do work for which I am not paid," he added, with mendacious literalness. "I see. Well, the merger's going through. It won't be official until the 16th of May, when the Premix stockholders meet, but that's just a formality. It's all cut and dried and in the bag now. Better let me pick you up a little Premix. There's still some lying around. You'll make a little less than 4 for 1 on it." "I'd had that in mind when I asked you about the merger," Rand said. "I have about 2,000 with you, haven't I?" He did a moment's mental arithmetic, then got out his checkbook. "Pick me up about 100 shares," he told the broker. "I've been meaning to get in on this ever since I heard about it." "I don't see how you did hear about it," Cabot said. "For obvious reasons, it's being kept pretty well under the hat." Rand grinned. Quote, "usually well-informed sources," unquote. Not the sources mentioned above. "Jeff, you know, this damn thing's worrying me," Cabot told him, writing a receipt and exchanging it for Rand's check. "I've been trying to ignore it, but I simply can't. Do you really think Lane Fleming was murdered by somebody who wanted to see this merger consummated, and who knew that this was an impossibility as long as Fleming was alive?" "Philip, I don't know. And furthermore, I don't give a damn," Rand lied. "If somebody wants me to look into it, and pays me my possibly exaggerated idea of what constitutes fair compensation, I will. And I'll probably come up with Fleming's murderer, dead or alive. But until then, it is simply no epidermis off my scrotum, and I advise you to adopt a similar attitude." They changed the subject, then, to the variety of pistols developed and used by the opposing nations in World War II, and the difficulties ahead of Cabot in assembling even a fairly representative group of them. Rand promised to mail Cabot a duplicate copy of his list of the letter code symbols used by the Nazis to indicate the factories manufacturing arms for them, as well as copies of some old wartime intelligence dope on enemy small arms. At a little past 1, he left Cabot's home and returned to the Fleming residence. There were 4 cars in the garage. The Packard sedan had not been moved, but the station wagon was facing in the opposite direction. The gray Plymouth was in the space for which Rand had driven earlier in the evening, and a black Chrysler Imperial had been run in on the left of the Plymouth. He put his own car in on the right of the station wagon, made sure that the Leech & Rigdon was locked in his glove box, and closed and locked the garage doors. Then he went up into the house, through the library, and by the spiral stairway to the gunroom. The garage had been open, he recalled, at the time of Lane Fleming's death. The availability of such an easy means of undetected ingress